Hey there guys, Metro. We're back again. Another dungeon. I'm not going to be on the beta testing this time. I'm just going to let you know right out of the gate here. I'm just done with it. Unless something crazy happens. Yeah, it's just impossible to finish keys. And they're making it even more impossible from what I could tell. So here's some changes. I'm going to read them all and give you my thoughts on them just because a lot of people are asking. But I think this is all part of a greater conversation here that needs to be, people need a platform to be able to discuss it. So that's what this video is. Now, first of all, we do have some affix changes. Crystals of Oblivion now move towards the previously targeted location if all players are out of combat. That's the thing that we talked about in the last video. If you guys didn't see that video, it was very, very strange because if you're out of combat, the target doesn't have, like, it doesn't go anywhere. The thing just sits there. And then as soon as you get back in combat, it picks a new target. And that was obviously very, very strange looking. But I didn't necessarily think it was wrong or bugged or anything. But yeah, they did fix that or change that, I guess. And then the Devour one, I've not actually, again, not seen yet personally, but it now does not prevent players from receiving healing, and it inflicts 1% down from 2% maximum health every 1 second. So that's a pretty big nerf to that. But we're talking about this on stream today too, and at least one guy's opinion was that these affixes are harder than the actual like 13 scaling situation, no matter what. These are more complicated. If you have this on a 12 versus you have this on a 13, what you have on a 13, the 13 might actually be easier in that way. And I'm actually shocked to hear that. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up playing. My original thought was that like a 12 was going to be very, very easy and a 13 was going to be very, very hard. And I think a lot of that's because of the numbers behind these things. So we talked about that a bunch at one point, but I assumed it was because the affix was going to be positive, like the Shadowlands seasonal affixes. But instead, it seems it's basically like a net negative, kind of like the Thundering seasonal affix in Dragonflight Season 1. Basically, it's going to be way more dangerous than it is going to be augmenting you. So anyway, they made a bunch of dungeon changes again. Now, I looked at this on, the last week. They did a bunch of changes too. What I'm going to say is they're making changes, which is great. Okay. But there's a lot of commentary out there saying like, oh, well, it's still beta. There's still weeks to go, like blah, blah, blah. There really isn't. There really isn't. We're basically 2 weeks until the game launches. Presumably the patch that's going to come with the expansion is going to come the Tuesday before the Thursday. We have no Mythic Plus for a while still. We have basically, I think it's like 5 weeks from right now until that happens, maybe 6. I don't really, yeah. Anyway, it's a while still. But the problem is once the game launches, who's going to be testing stuff on the beta? Like, I get it. They're probably still going to be like super bleeding edge players still on there. But there's going to be like less than 50 people playing, right? I would imagine. You know what I mean? It's like not even going to be like 100 people doing this stuff. No regular person is going to be on there. They're going to be preparing stuff on live. There's not that much to do before the season starts, but like realistically, the first week of the expansion, you know what I mean? If they did any changes then, that week's out, right? Definitely. And then the first week of the season, that's definitely out. Because that's still a week where they have to tune Mythic Plus, but that's out. Because nobody's going to be on the beta at that point. People will then be actually doing what content there is. So they really only gave themselves like 1 extra week. If you consider maybe they'll do some big changes that second week of the launch where there isn't really any new content coming out, but it's still all there just for casual, consumption. That could be a week. So they gave themselves 1 week. So reality we have with 3 weeks. This comes out in 3 weeks effectively. And that's scary because these changes are not looking like that of a company who's satisfied with what their product looks like right now. And I say that because the timer changes. Now, I don't really understand half these things. Like when you see this, crush damage has been increased on the last boss, right? It's like, great, that fight was hard. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's already hard. It's all is hard. Everything's hard, dude. The affixes are hard. The dungeons are hard. I get it. We don't have the full complement of gear that we should have by the end of the season, but it doesn't matter because they slowed down the gearing process to such a degree that the gear we're actually testing it at is probably for a reason, dude. Like, I don't think they just randomly assigned a number. They probably expect a lot of people to be playing at this level for a long time. So yeah, I don't think it's as off as people make it sound, but it's not. You're going to get a lot of gear. Everything's hard. The dungeons are hard. And then you see stuff like this. Necrotic Wake Mythic Plus timer has been adjusted from 36 minutes to 32 minutes. Mist of Turnus Scythe. Enemy forces requirements have been adjusted. Apparently, it's like a 14% you now need 14% more count, which I never really understand. I guess that means you need at least 2 more packs, probably, maybe 3 more packs. I don't really get that part. Lots of changes. They buffed the hell out of the. Wait, what happened? It's like a bugged. It's not recess or 2 recess or something. Anyway, Tradova's scaling. The shield now scales with key level. There's a couple things like that where they become scaling with key level. I think that's a buff. Like, I think it makes it harder, right? Siege of Bralis, 2 more minutes taken off that. Tidal Surge now creates an additional set of waves after 4 seconds. Stone Vault, they just changed one thing, which is also a typo. Erikara, City of Echoes. Something got I don't even know what this is. Insatiable's duration went from 12 to 60 seconds. Like, wow. What are these changes? You know what I mean? Presumably all of these are buffs, like to make the dungeon harder. Timer 38 to 35. Another one. This is the biggest one. Dawnbreaker. What I would consider the hardest dungeon. 35 to 30 minutes. They took 5 minutes off the timer. That's ridiculous. Never seen anything like that before. But to be fair, they don't normally do. Like, I don't know when they did this the last time they did this. So, like, usually the timers change very, very early on in the testing, and then they're that way for good. So I don't know when the last time they did something like this was at all. But the confusing part about this all is how wild this is. I think the lowest one was 3 minutes, right? And this is probably more than 3 minutes off the timer, because if you have to pull at least 2 more packs, well, maybe it's more like 2, but either way, like, yeah, that's basically a timer nerf. They just, instead of nerfing the timer, they changed it, because I like that dungeon when you need a lot of count. I think it is a better dungeon this way. But yeah, I don't know what any of these changes are. Like, I don't know the names of the mechanics. I barely know the names of even the bosses. So I can't comment on what all of these other things are. But from what I can tell, it seems like they're making dungeons harder and harder. Now, here's the caveat to that, in my opinion. They're nerfing the timers in a way, a lot of people might ask me to give my opinions on these timer changes, right? And I would try to be fair and, weigh it on both sides. Like, well, in my experience, the timers maybe were too lenient, so they needed to take time off. But did they need to take 5 minutes off? Probably not. That's an opinion I could see myself saying 9 out of 10 times, okay? I can't even comment on this because I don't know that I've ever upgraded a key on the beta. I honestly don't know. I cannot remember upgrading a key on the beta. I'm sure I did at some point. But like the last stream we did, I'm pretty sure we only finished 1 key. And I know this is a lot of this is lever culture and pug situations, and on top of that beta, because like people care even less. Like, now that there's no score, people care even less. You would think it would be easier, but it's actually harder in that way. But a lot of it's the dungeons. Like, honestly, a lot of it is. And I don't, I blame lever culture, and I hate the lever epidemic and the way people act, and they, they only care about themselves. Super selfish. Like, what else can I say about it, right? I made a million videos on this topic now. But at the end of the day, nobody's leaving a key that's going to be a double upgrade with 0 deaths, right? I mean, you got to be fair. You got to say that, because it's just the truth. Like, at no point is somebody going to leave a double upgrade or a triple, a slam dunk, we destroyed this key. They leave because they think their expectations are not being met, and as such, they don't care anymore, right? Everybody who leaves has a reason to do it. It's a terrible reason, and it shouldn't be allowed, but they still have a reason to do it. So this is even more scary when you think of it this way, because this lever culture thing and how bad the beta was is probably exactly what live's going to look like. The dungeons are so hard that you just can't finish them without a lot of deaths. It's just how it goes. Like, and so, comments get made like, all right, well, if the dungeon's killing you too frequently, then you should be doing a lower key. But now that they nerfed the timers, is that true anymore? Because think about it, right? If Dawnbreaker was hard mechanically and it was difficult tuning wise and a lot of deaths were happening, but you can have like 20, 30 deaths and you can still upgrade the key, you're in the right key level by Blizzard standards, And so now on top of this, don't forget, they also made that a fix where it takes 15 seconds off for any 1 death. So, like, yeah, if you have a full wipe, you're pretty much done. Like, the key's pretty much over now, even on trash. Like, you're fucked. So if on top of that, it's a 35-minute down to 30-minute, 1 wipe is now, 1/30th instead of 1/35th, right? So it's like, I don't know, man. I don't know how to to rationalize any of this. And it just seems to me like no matter what, it's going to be, it just gets worse and worse every week, but it's just going to be awful. It's just going to be very, very, very hard. And because of the way the pug world is working right now, it's going to be like, I could easily see us having like 90% disband rate. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I wish I somehow kept the stats on the beta. Like, obviously, I can go back in the stream and look at every key we started, but I would imagine there's over a 90% disband rate on the beta right now. And like I said, I don't think anybody's leaving. Like, they're not getting to the end boss and be like, oh, that was fun, I'm leaving now. They're all leaving because they think they have a reason, and whether or not it's true, that mentality is not going to change. So, this got said on the stream today that like Blizzard seems to be intent on killing pugs. Now, if that was the case, they had way, way, way better chances to do that. And I honestly don't know. Like, I could see them doing it, to be fair. Like, if they actually did not want anybody pugging this, they could make that a reality. Like, you have to have certain parameters, just like in Mythic Raid. You remember? Mythic Raid, I don't remember. Or was it something to do with loot, right? In WoD, I think it was just loot in general, I think. Loot had to be, you couldn't trade loot unless you had 8 out of 10 guildmates, stuff like that. You know what I mean? They have the ability and the thought process, at least there, to do something like this if they wanted to. So I don't think that any of this is targeted at pugs. But I do think the problem starts with the top. Like, the absolute top is killing this game. And it trickles down to the point now where, this is basically just enforcing lever mentality, enforcing meta even more. And the game just becomes unrecognizable. It stops becoming a social game. It stops becoming something where people try to get better at. And they're just, they're just going to hop from key to key until they succeed. And now it's even more going to be more difficult because you can't have wipes and actually, because like that's the only saving grace in season 4. Season 4 was hard, but it was like, all right, bro, come on. It's like that in Ataldazar, a lot of keys in season 3 and 2 as well. It's like, all right, we can wipe 3-4 times here and we can still upgrade this key. That might be too far. I've seen a lot of people, like when Grawl reacted to this, I got submitted, like I watched him do it basically. And a lot of people in his chat agreed that they should make, not this, but the previous when they said they were going to make the fix that's going to make you lose 15 seconds. There was a lot of people in that community saying, good, you should not be able to upgrade a key with like 10 deaths. And it's like, wow, those people must not pug, first of all. They probably, realistically, they only watch good players do keys. Because if you ever done a key yourself and you think 10 deaths is a lot and you should be severely punished for 10 deaths, yeah, that's pretty normal, bro. Like 10 deaths is very, very normal. In fact, I would say that's quite low. Anything under 15 deaths is like, oh yeah, key went kind of well. We had 2 guys today combined for, I think it was 14 deaths total. And we almost upgraded that key. It was a 17 Ultimate. The only reason we didn't, or 16, it was 16 Ultimate. The only reason we didn't upgrade it was because a guy disconnected. We would have upgraded the key if the guy didn't disconnect. And there was 2 guys total that combined for 14 deaths. And there was like, I think there was like 20 deaths or something total. So I don't know. I mean, I get it. But I also don't get it because, at the end of the day, if the goal is to have progression difficulty in Mythic Plus, you got to change the way the system works. Really, the timers should be super lenient because if the only thing people cared about was upgrading the key, this would make it a lot easier to make that a uniform thing where you actually get to a point where you're physically unable to do it. But because the timers are tight starting at a low level of keys, it makes it a lot harder to make any type of progression, Because if I did a 5 and our DPS was too low, well, what do we do about that? You know what I mean? Like if we hit a time where the key is not hard, but the timer is, you're done. Like that's it. You can't make progress at that point. And that's why I originally brought this up because I wanted to make this point. Like, oh, just do lower keys. That's where you should be. You're not at the level you should be for that level 10, for example. But that's not necessarily true, dude. If the timers are too tight and too small, and I do a 10, it may not challenge me whatsoever. Like as a blood DK, it may be boring to survive. But the timer is so tight that I now have to do astronomically difficult things just to pull it off. And that social pressure is not something that's part of WoW. Like they didn't design it Like the group is, this happens all the time in Mythic Plus, by the way, if you don't know this. Like since BFA, I've said, like, show me a run where we have 0 deaths and no mistakes and it's not an upgrade. And then I will change what I'm doing. That never happens, right? You never get to the end of a dungeon, everything went perfectly, and you did not upgrade it. I've never been submitted a key like that once. Not a single time. I've never had a key like that happen to me a single time. There's been one example. I think I published it. It was Temple of Cethralis. We had 2 deaths total and we didn't upgrade the key. That was the closest it ever came. And now it's like, now you're from the ground up, you're going to have to do this crazy shit. I mean, that's what it sounds like. I don't know. You know, again, people keep saying it's just beta, wait and see. We're kind of running out of time, man. But in terms of whether or not I think these timers changes are justified, I have no idea. I literally haven't finished a key in time. I don't know if I did at all, period. Not once. Besides when we were doing like 2s early on, but we didn't realize you can do 10s. I don't know that I finished a key in time. And it makes me think that it could be that they were too loose. Like, I have to give Blizzard the benefit of the doubt here. Because to remove 5 minutes from a timer, that probably means it wasn't like 35 wasn't tight. You know what I mean? It probably means it was like, you know, fall, like Galakrond's fall, where you, and then Azure Vaults, like AD, you know, these types of dungeons where you're pretty much double upgrading it if you do it well. That you can take 5 minutes off AV, and it's still the easiest dungeon, right? So we'll see. I don't know, but all I know is Mythic Plus continues to look like it gets harder and harder every build, basically. Tanking Mythic Plus gets harder and harder every build. And I'm kind of excited for it, to be honest, at this point, because it's kind of be so wild and so different. It might actually feel very rewarding. Like, I'm hoping that it will feel rewarding, because you would expect early on people to be more resilient to it. You know, if it stays this way for 2 years, it's going to suck. But it might be more resilient, more resiliency, and more people are trying, and they're actually like here to progress. And maybe I'll be totally off on the way people respond to this. Maybe people will finally start to realize that a key that's not in time does have value to you as a progression player. You need to learn. Like, this is so crazy that people realize this. Like, we just never fought the last boss of some of these dungeons, dude. I did a lot of these dungeons multiple times. I never fought the last boss of them. I did the last boss of Dawnbreaker once. You know what I mean? That's bad. You need to do the last boss. You need to do the full dungeon to know whether or not you can succeed in the dungeon. So all these people who quit after 10 minutes, they're just making everybody else worse. So maybe somehow this resiliency will shine through and the player base will actually start caring more about learning the dungeons and being perfect in them, you know, instead of just lackadaisically like not interrupting key casts. You sit there with 6 casters and you got 3 guys just not interrupting, you know, like maybe all that stuff will go away, but I doubt it. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys think about this. I'm very eager to hear your comments.